Hello and welcome to this yet another edition of Credible Talks podcast that we do here. This is the fourth edition of the podcast that is going live. It's being broadcasted, and today we have with us Mansi Tiwari. She is the head of corporate communications at the Marico Group. She's been a journalist earlier. She's worked with many publications, in fact, reputed publications, and then she shifted to corporate communication, and that's exactly what we're going to discuss today. We're going to ask her what is the secret of a successful transition from being a journalist to a successful corporate communications leader in the industry. Let me first welcome Mansi. Mansi, welcome to the show. We know a bit about you, but it will be, only apt to ask you to introduce yourself a little so that our viewers can get a better understanding of what you've done and how you've started your career and what you're doing now.
Sure. First of all, thanks Ida, for having me here. It's great to be a part of Credible Talk podcast. So I think most of my introduction you've already done. I have been in the industry for over 17 years now, and I like to introduce myself as a journalist. Once a journalist, always a journalist. I, like you said, worked with some great publications, wrote for Statesman and the Economic Times. And then, when I switched sides, I was lucky to work with some great and well-loved brands like Pidilite, Vodafone India, now known as Vodafone Idea, and now, as you said, I had corporate communications for Marico. It's been a great journey so far, and of course, like you said, transition does take some time, but if you have put your mind to it, it's not an easy. It's not a difficult job to do.
Wonderful. So let me just straight away ask you this question that is top on the top of my mind today. uh, what is the secret, like what is the most crucial aspect of this transition? Because I know I'm a journalist myself. I know a lot of people who tend to do it, but and they quite often, there are many people who are at the cusp of doing it, but they have this question on their minds: what is the crucial aspect of success from being a journalist to a communications leader?
So I think the very first thing that comes to my mind, and I know a lot of journalists might not agree with it. As a journalist, you have an attitude. I think that's the first step is to recognize and admit it, and then be ready to drop the attitude part of being a journalist. However, at the same time, you have to ensure that you retain the aptitude of a reporter. I think that this mental shift is a big one, and you have to wholeheartedly be ready and prepared to embrace it. When I switched on from journalism to comms, it wasn't that one fine day I just simply decided and moved on. I spoke to a lot of people in the industry, and I had quite a few seniors who had made that transition, with that journey, and had some inputs to give. But I think this was one common theme that sort of stood out from all the pieces of advice that I got. Uh, as a journalist, you're used to being treated in a certain way, but when you switch tables, it's a different thing. You are no longer going to be the one who people are going to approach. You will have to play the reverse role. And I think that mental shift is where, I've seen quite a few well established journalists and great journalists falter after having made this switch. So I think the key is to always remember, what was that one reason what that compelled you to make that move. And I honestly believe that the reason was compelling enough for you to make that switch. It is then compelling enough for you to adapt and learn. So you have to have that growth mindset, be ready to learn, unlearn. And I honestly believe, no career transition, even if we keep aside journalism and communications, no career transition in my mind would be successful until and unless you see, it as an opportunity to grow in a new and a challenging role. So I think the mental shift, being ready, to take on newer challenges, be ready to learn, and of course, research a lot. I think another
Right.
critical aspect is, that you have to be, of course, mentally prepared, but then as a communications professional, you are going to be selling a brand. a product.
mm, mm.
So I think that value alignment between the brand or the organization that you're going to work for and yourself has to be established very clearly. Only then will you be able to sell the brand.
Right. Personally, what have been the challenges that you faced while you transited from one side to another? And also, it'll be very interesting to know when is the time that you actually, feel comfortable that okay, now I am settled, or I at least know what I am doing.
So I wouldn't say challenges, but there definitely were, a lot of skills that I had to pick up on my way. I think the first and the most stark difference between the two worlds is the pace at which the two move, and I know everybody says that, news out, life out of a newsroom is very, very different, but you are never prepared for that difference, You would keep hearing about it, but it hits you once you enter the other side. I think as
Mm-hmm.
a journalist, you have your pressing deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
Not that corporate
Mm-hmm.
world doesn't have deadlines, but the definition, the basic definition of pressing changes, right? So I think,
Right.
and then also for me personally, I think, I was very, very restless in the initial phase of transition. I wasn't seeing the impact of my work. As a journalist, you see your stories on a daily basis, but
Right.
that daily impact, that immediate instant reward recognition, etc., was missing, of course, in the corporate world. But
Mm-hmm.
then you tend to realize that the slow pace also gives you a lot of time to be thorough with your work, to be able to be more creative with what you are doing. So
Right.
you have to adjust to the slower pace. uh,
Mm-hmm.
Also, I think another big difference between the two worlds is that as a journalist, you are more or less on your own. You're like a lone wolf. The success or failure of your stories on you only. However, for me also, I had to, it took me some time to again become a team player.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wide, there's your own communications team. Then you are internally also working with various functions, various stakeholders. You have your agencies, vendors, partners who you're going to be working with. So I think it just changes you into a good team player as well. So I mean, these were the two major differences that I actually felt myself when I made that transition.
So, when we are taught journalism in our schools, and then when we actually also practice it, it's said that a journalist needs to have nose for news. They should know where the peg lies, where the news lies, what is the most what's the crux of a story. When you shift from one side to another, do those principles still apply, or are they change, or how does that work when you're in the corporate communication side?
So I think the basic remains the same. For a good communications professional, being a great journalist is always an asset. You have the storytelling skills that are required. You have the nose for news, as you said. And like I said earlier, you have to drop the attitude, but not the aptitude of a journalist. So I
Mm-hmm.
think, the basics still remain the same, and you have to continue, working on those. However,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I believe similarities end, because as a reporter, as a journalist, you are trained in a particular way. You have to be unbiased. You have to, just report the facts without taking sides. However, as a communications or a PR professional, you have to admit that you are not going to be unbiased. You're not going to be just a by, as you're not going to be an observer, I would say. You are going to be selling a brand, a product. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's where um, the two sort of differ from each other. And the
Mm-hmm.
consumers today, they also want to know that a company cares about them. How is that the company's value system sort of matches with their own value system? What is it that the company is doing to add value to their life? And that is what, as a communications and a PR professional, you're going to do, which is going to be very, very different from, writing as a journalist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with some points there. I mean, I've been a journalist for most of my career and just trying to make a shift myself. But These are the things that keep coming to my mind as well. I mean, there is a perception that if you have been a good journalist, you will automatically be a good communications, corporate communications expert as well. Is that true, or it needs way more than that?
It requires a lot more than that, you know. A, a journalist is essentially writing stories for the newspaper. However,
Right.
or for recording stories for a channel. However, as a communications professional, you're doing much more than that. You know, your job would include content creation, it would include counseling, it would include crisis management, it would include stakeholder management. It would also include thinking strategically so that you have to come up with holistic plans to be able to add value to the organization. You know, you are setting and casting a vision for your business. And you'll have to come up with plans which can sort of then help your business grow, help your business achieve the kind of targets it has set out to achieve. So I think the understanding of how the business works is a very clear differentiator between journalism and corporate communications.
Hmm. Interesting. I think we have a couple of questions here. Let's just understand what people are trying to ask. Okay, Vishaka Ranjan, she is asking, is it easier or more difficult to get your work done when you are on the opposite side of the table? I think that's something that will be on the minds of most of the people who are watching this today. I'll ask you to respond to that.
Uh, I will talk as a corporate communications professional. It all depends on the kind of relationship you have with media. Uh, Media is looking for content. You are looking for on media space. Uh,
Hmm.
However, not everything that you want to say would be of interest to media. So uh, I think it's all about whether you know what is going to work with the media or not, and being an ex-journalist, you have that edge, right? You understand what works, what doesn't work with the media. But having said that, you have to have that great network, great relationship with the media to be able to sell your story authentically and credibly. So I wouldn't say whether, I wouldn't compare the two because they're two very different, sort of fields if you look at it. But I think you have to be, you can't be dependent just on your journalistic skills or on your network. So it has to be a combination of the two to be able to make your story sell.
Right. There's another question, Neha Diwan. Yeah. So she asks, do you miss storytelling as a corporate communications professional, or are able to get such nuances in your current role? So do you miss storytelling, or you're already
Honestly speaking, I think even as a PR or a communications professional, you are telling a story, right?
right,
Um,
right.
uh, it's just that the way you narrate that story is going to be a little different. So when
Yes.
you are engaging with your consumers either through the earned media space or through your own social media presence, etc., you are looking for a way to communicate. So you are in a way telling that story. Now the medium is
Mm,
just going to be a little different. So
right.
I think that's something that storytelling is one crucial element which I believe is common both in journalism and communication.
And personally, I also feel that now, with the advent of social media and the kind of tools that we have available at our hands, I mean, you can always be a storyteller, and you don't even need to be a journalist to be a storyteller at this point of time. No, you just need to know what you're wanting to say. What's the story? So I think that aspect is already taken care of with the kind of technology that we are seeing around. Another
True.
question, Praveen. Yeah, this is Mr. Praveen asking you, Madam, are you comfortable in your present role or not? Very short, but a very, very interesting question.
Oh, yes, I definitely am. I made this switch some 12 years back. Now, I'm pretty much comfortable with what I'm doing, enjoying myself. There's a lot a lot of freedom, flexibility that corporate communication sort of gives you. It's a much wider canvas at your disposal. So, yeah, enjoying myself.
Has there been? I mean, let me just add to it. Has there been a point when were probably low because of something in the professional life, and you regretted taking this shift? I'm sure that happens to a lot of us, even while we are in different professions, right?
So I think I was right in the beginning of my journey as a communications professional, I would say, Suja. Uh, and I was emphasizing in my earlier response to one of your questions that you have to do, you have to research well, and you have to ensure that the value system sort of, of the organization matches your value system. So there was the initial, the first sort of opportunity that I looked at and took up in the comms role uh, didn't sort of, work the way I wanted to. And that was the initial period, right? And it was a difficult phase. So, yes, definitely there has been. But then like I said, I kept reminding myself what was that reason that made me switch. So I was always intrigued about the entire ecosystem of communications, be it PR, be it communications, be it media, and how well it coexisted. So much
Mm-hmm.
so that when I went to US for my masters, I was clear enough that I'm going to take certain courses in PR so as to understand the nuances of industry well. I would say I was very clear in my mind that I would make that switch. So not that I doubted my decision, but then I realized that the amount of possibly the research that I would have done on an organization wasn't enough, and there was a clear mismatch. But then, having said that, from then on, I think that was the initial 8 9 months where I had to struggle. Post which it's been a very smooth journey.
I also wanted to ask you, most of the times as journalists, we tend to be these happy-go-lucky people who dress up in a certain way, who, roam around in a certain manner, but suddenly then you land up in a corporate office and you have to behave and you have to take care of certain mannerisms in terms of how you talk to people around, how you talk, stay in your office. Did that seem awkward initially?
I think initially I would say yes. No, you're looking at a 9 to 5 sort of a corporate job, where as a media professional, there are no set timelines as in time office timings for you. So of course that was initial, phase of a few months where you had to force yourself and ensure that you are reaching office on time, you're dressing up a certain way. But I think the corporate world has also undergone a lot of change. Organizations are no longer monitoring your attendance. And I mean, I don't remember the last time I had to clock in my attendance anywhere. You can work, and now thanks to the changed ways of working, people are working from home, people are working from wherever they want to, and the end result is about getting the work done. So I think
Yeah.
there's been a lot that has changed over these years in the corporate world as well. Companies are not so rigid about dressing up formally.
Mhm.
So I think those initial phase, of course, is a little difficult because it's a completely new territory for you. But
Mhm.
just take it as a change and adapt.
Yeah. Interesting. Mansi, more often than not, we hear about this. There is always this limited, amount of tussle between PR professionals and the media personnel. I mean, most of the times that the journalists would, criticize PR professionals and, for their conduct or even for their professionalism. Rarely it happens vice versa, but yeah, I have heard instances of that as happen as well. Do you think there is a way that the two can coexist and work in a in a better coordination and in tandem for the betterment of both?
So I honestly believe that the two will have to coexist, right? There's a huge news gap, which the media is trying to get news. We as communications professional are trying to get some on media, like I said earlier. So the two will have to coexist. And if you look at it, we are all telling insightful, interesting stories which sort of work well with our audiences. So we are in this entire business of telling stories. So there are a lot of similarities between the two industries, and I think there is a You know, there has to be, the two industries have to coexist. Now, I understand, like you said, of course, there have been in the recent past a lot of such instances. But I think, so this is where I think both the sides will have to make an effort. Uh,
Hmm.
and I'm talking as a communication professional now, but I've been an ex-journalist, right?
Hmm.
I even now continue to get press releases, pictures from the media. Now, somebody somewhere is not doing the homework properly, right? You're not cleaning up your media list. 12 years, back I moved, and I still continue to get those mail means something's not right somewhere. So I think as a PR professional, you have to train, and train some more. You know, you have
Hmm.
to know, and that doesn't mean that you have to shy away from reaching out to a journalist. I don't think that's how it will work. But you have to know when to reach out. You know, what would be the right time to reach out, and for what to reach out. Not every press release
Hmm.
merits, constant follow-up. And I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that is where most of the, I believe, corporate communication people would be willing to listen to the PR agencies as well. You know, I understand there are a lot of pressure from the client side on the agency as well to get the release picked up across media. But you
Hmm.
have to be innovative with the way you tell your stories, and then pick your battle. You know, you have to pick and choose what is it that you're going to be following up. You know, not everything, like I said, requires a follow up.
Yes.
Also, I think it's a for any relationship. You know, it's all about trust and respect, and it's a two-way street. So until and unless you give that respect to journalism and journalists, you can't earn that. So I think that is where PR professionals are going wrong. But then, having said that, naming and shaming anybody on social media is never a great idea. You know, as a journalist, if you have an issue with something, and if you do not want to engage with that particular PR person, pick up the phone, speak to somebody senior in the organization, participate in industry dialogues, and make it, so give some inputs. But what happens typically is that, posting something on social media is the easiest and the quickest thing you can possibly do. So I
Yes.
think it's a work, of course, is required at both the ends, but the industry will have to coexist.
I think that's very interesting and very apt advice here, coming from you. Mansi, I would digress a little, but ask you a question about what we are doing here at Comms Credible. I mean, in the run up to the initiative that we have taken on influencer marketing, or honoring the influencer marketing campaigns that have happened in India for past couple of years. We have launched Incredibles, which is basically an award series for them. First of its kind initiative exclusively focused on influencer marketing campaigns, and also for the first time, we're bringing in a global jury to judge the Indian campaigns. I want to understand from you, as a communications leader, as a communications professional, how important and significant is influencer marketing for people like you? I mean, people who shape up the branding or campaigning for your respective companies. How important is influencer marketing today?
So I think it's become a very critical part of any campaign. I don't remember the last time I saw a campaign with just traditional media only approach. We're looking at holistic plans for any brief that you have. You know, you have to look at paid, owned, and earned base. And
Hmm.
I think brands are also increasingly realizing that they have to be more perceptive about emotions. They have to be different in terms of offering the kind of experiences that they're offering to their consumers. And this is where influencer marketing sort of, brilliantly allows any brand to do.
Hmm.
So, influencer marketing is definitely here to stay. And so, if you just step back a little and think what influencer marketing actually is, it's nothing more than, I would say it's an evolved form of what we used to initially have in the form of brand ambassadors, right? You would have in the past, we had seen Bollywood and sports celebrities endorsing certain brands and products because they commanded, a great amount of influence on the masses. And, that's how it sort of, from there, it has now evolved to a point where the ASCII now defines influence as anybody with a device and a social media presence. It doesn't matter whether you have 100 followers or 10 million followers. It's about you have an influence. If you have an influence on the buyers, on consumers' buying decision, then you are an influencer. So I think this entire definition of influencer has changed, and that is why we see a lot of micro and nano influencers also coming up, because people are finding it much more easier to relate to these people. And the consumer is also very, very intelligent and advanced now. So they know the kind of authentic content that is being offered to them. And the influencers, I believe, are putting in a lot of effort to curate content which works really well with the audience. So I
Mhm.
think it's something that brands cannot ignore and are not ignoring it. If you look at the kind of spends brands have on influencer marketing, it's definitely one of the key pillars in the entire communications approach now. And I see it, growing from strength to strength.
Wonderful, and that's the space that we want to recognize, we want to honor, and honor it in a very credible manner. Because that's where the key lies, right? I mean, you have a lot of campaigning happening. It's important to see what are the best practices that are being carried out in the industry, so that those practices can be emulated or even done in much better manner tomorrow. Thank you
Yeah,
so
so
much,
in
Mark.
fact,
Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
I was
Please go
just
ahead.
adding to that point, Suja. So if you look at it, influencer marketing has reached to a point where, if you look at any of the e-com portals these days, you
Hmm.
have this option to review the product, right? And
Right,
as an end consumer, I always, my decision is influenced by the kind of review and rating that a product has received. So I think,
right.
influencer marketing is not only about ensuring and getting the right kind of influencer, but it sort of cuts across platforms now. So I think this is one big space that is evolving, and I think I would say that you guys have done a great job in putting together this property, and I'm sure it's going to grow from here.
Thanks a lot. We look forward to a lot of support from you as well, because to be honest, at various levels, we are doing it because we want to make sure that this space is recognized and it grows, it becomes bigger, so that it helps the industry at large. Thanks anyway, Mansi. It was a wonderful chat with you. I hope there is a time when we can sit together and have a cup of coffee and discuss this more, because we both are journalists and we'll always remain journalists wherever we go, right?
Very true. I said once a journalist, always a journalist. Right? It was a pleasure being here and talking to you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for coming on this show.
Thanks. Thanks.